Good morning.
All right, you're all set to go.
Good morning. Welcome everybody to the April 18th meeting of the Tompkins County Legislature Facilities and Infrastructure Committee. We'll call the meeting to order. Are there any changes to the agenda? Looks like we have a full committee here and Susan's online with us. Good morning, Susan.
Good morning.
Go right to public comment. I understand Mr. Britton are online with us. And Bruce, are you there?
Yep. Yes. Doug wanted to go first. We are here.
Oh, Doug and Bruce. Okay.
Oh, both of us. You got us both. Thank you. Okay, my turn? Okay. Thank you. Here I go. Hi. Good morning. I'm Doug Britton. I just wanted to give you a heads up on something that might be on your agenda for next month, which is the intersection realignment of Pleasant Grove Road and Craddock Farm Drive. This stems from a few years ago when Cornell announced this North Campus residential expansion, and the town planning board said, you want to build a bunch of dorms, that's fine, but first you have to realign that intersection to direct traffic more readily to the Cornell campus. And Cornell said fine, so they agreed they would be responsible for designing and constructing a realigned intersection and then would donate it to the county, which is fine, except that Cornell wanted to build the dorms first and then do the intersection realignment afterwards. And the town planning board said, oh, whoa, wait a minute. We don't want you coming back in a couple years and saying, oh gosh, we'd love to realign the intersection, but the county won't let us. We need an ironclad guarantee. So that's where the MOU came from, the memorandum of understanding between the town, county, and Cornell that said the intersection would be realigned no matter what. So that's fine. It was assigned. Cornell began work on the dorm. They hired Labella to start coming up with some realignment designs. They came up with a couple. They came up with a roundabout. They came up with a T intersection. And by then the dorms were up and occupied, and somehow Cornell seems to have lost interest in fulfilling its obligation to rebuild the intersection. So everything is stalled. And then you may recall this past August 1st at your county legislature meeting, Shauna Black announced the plan to get the project moving again. She said the town and county would hire a consultant to consider various realignment possibilities and to recommend how best to comply with the MOU. So a contract with B&L was drawn up. The report was due last week. I guess it's a little late. We haven't seen it. I presume you have not either. But we have read the contract. And unfortunately, this report will not get us any closer to satisfying the MOU, because according to the terms of the contract, the consultants are not allowed to recommend a realignment, any realignment, even though that was the purpose of this little study. So what that means is that the past 8.5 months and $25,000 have been wasted, which is a real shame. And I would like to now hand off to Bruce, who will explain how and why this process has failed. And I thank you for listening.
Mr. Chairman, it's okay if I go ahead?
Yes, go ahead, Doug.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So I'm Bruce Britton, wanted to follow up with Doug on the purpose of the B&L study was to determine the best way to comply with the MOU. But the B&L contract never mentions the MOU, never mentions that intersection realignment is required. And in fact, the B&L contract is so restrictive to actually prevent compliance with the MOU. So as an example, the MOU, as Doug mentioned, requires intersection realignment to direct traffic more readily to the Cornell campus. But instead of referencing this requirement, the contract calls for B&L to determine if improvements to direct traffic are warranted and feasible. But Cornell, as Doug mentioned, Cornell, the town and county already agreed back in 2019 that the redirection is warranted and feasible and desirable and required. It's a little too late to hire a consultant now to rewrite history. B&L's recommendations, which we'll be seeing soon, are based on a number of factors, but not mentioned is effectiveness of directing traffic more readily to the Cornell campus. So the MOU has been just written entirely out of the equation. Another example, B&L has been restricted to only suggesting intersection improvements that can fit within the county's 50-foot right-of-way. Cornell owns the adjoining land. They're happy to have the intersection wherever it ends up. Doug mentioned their Labella's, Cornell hired Labella to come up with a roundabout and a T. Those both went over 100 feet beyond the county's right-of-way. If you stay within the right-of-way, the center line can only deviate a very little, and you can't end up with a realignment. So we haven't seen the report, but we wanted to register concerns about the process before seeing the product. We'll know soon enough what we get, but if the report only recommends adjustments to existing intersection, ADA curb cuts, drainage, signage, lighting, it's not because that's what's best, but it's because that's what the contract restricted them to, investment in the status quo. So we appreciate the thought and the effort trying to get this process restarted. I think we have to try again. Forest Home had some roundabout proposals. There are lots of good ideas. It would be nice to brainstorm this together and get going again. And I guess I'm out of my time, you're out of your time, and I thank you very much.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Bruce and Doug. Your concerns are noted, and with that report pending, we'll ask that there be a report on it at next month's meeting, and see if we can address these concerns as well.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments this morning? Doesn't appear to be. Okay. Minutes from February 15th were circulated. Any comments or motions? Moved by Mike to approve, second by Greg. Discussion, all in favor?
You got to do roll call because Susan. You got to do roll call.
We'll do a roll call then. I'll start with Susan.
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Greg?
Yes.
Randy?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. Minutes are approved. Chair's report, don't have one this morning. Last month we did not meet. There were no items at that point in time, but at the 2 meetings ago at the county legislature meeting, there was a discussion about the complexities of implementing the green facilities capital plans and look for some direction as to future grant opportunities. So we'll be coming up on that topic in just a few moments and ask that that be a special topic for today. And let me move on to the county administrator's report. Good morning, Lisa.
Good morning, Lee. Thank you. I'll be brief. I wanted to just provide the committee with an update that this month, departments who have capital projects are completing their PAR forms, project approval request forms, in preparation for the 2025 budget and 5-year capital plan. I think the theme of this year's budget process, maybe every year's budget process, is one of competing worthy priorities, and that will be true in our capital budget. And to your point, Lee, Terry and Arel will be providing us with a heads up and the status report on our green facilities project later in this meeting, and that will be one point of discussion as phase 2 for green facilities is not currently in the 5-year capital plan, but it's certainly a priority of the county, so something that we'll need further discussion on. And another point of that I just wanted this committee to be aware of that has not been explicitly in our capital projects, but something that is becoming more and more of a conversation is the safety of our buildings. And we have a monthly meeting of interdepartmental meeting where we're discussing countywide safety and security and implementing changes to building security where feasible. That those funds come out of the facilities capital budget. There have been smaller projects to fortify and improve some of our buildings, access control systems, et cetera. But I think there are going to be, we're going to continue to be looking at that, and that may play more of a role in the future in some of our capital projects and retrofitting buildings where we now have building security. It becomes more of a costly capital investment. So something else I just wanted this committee to be aware of because it's become more of a concern at our county buildings. And that's all I got.
Are you thinking more technology, cameras and systems, or are you looking at potentially some projects that might include, changing entrances and the flow of traffic?
Both. So far, we've done a lot of investment in installing cameras and intercoms and things of that nature that have been, we have a number of cameras, but collectively it's a large investment, but it's been small enough that we've been able to fund those through the facilities existing budget for capital. But for instance, with the new security that we have in the Human Services building, it was not designed for that, and it makes the entryway challenging. And so in order to solve some of the issues that we're having there in the long run, it would require a change to the front of the building. I don't know that we're going to see that necessarily in this upcoming capital plan, but it's something on the longer range to think about.
Do you envision it being more of a comprehensive platform or project, or a number of individual ones?
That's a great question. I haven't thought about how best. I mean, each building has different layout and different needs, certainly. So it would have to be by building, but it could be its own category of a PAR form for sure.
Questions from committee? Well, thanks for bringing that to our attention. Greg?
Sorry, when you say, so would we have an opportunity to look at it holistically across, right, all of the pieces across? Okay.
Yes. And that's what we've been trying to do as a group. And, it's county administration and facilities, ITS, Department of Emergency Response. I hope I'm not forgetting anyone. But, we are trying to, whatever we're implementing, we're trying to make it so that it can be implemented across buildings. So, for instance, the cameras, access control systems, and so forth. But certain buildings need, a different type of attention.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Lisa, I still have in the back of my mind the discussions that happened with the library security and whether a downtown presence was going to be necessary, kind of in a broader view, especially in the context of the center of government building being developed and so on. I don't know if that's something that we ought to revisit when we're looking at not just the physical enhancements, but what it's going to take to kind of provide a level of security across the facilities.
Yes, and So right now, a lot of the use of the cameras are in place and are often being used after the fact to gain footage of incidents that occurred, overnight or what have you. We don't have a position that's working across departments that is reviewing, live camera footage for preventative measures for security, and that's something that we've discussed as a group. We have an employee health and safety coordinator who's currently in administration. That role was never really meant to take this type of security or to be involved to this degree in this type of security. It's health and safety. But she is spending a lot of her time on these sorts of things and incident reports and so forth. So that's something that we've discussed is perhaps a role that would be more involved in employee security, safety.
And we're doing risk assessments now on all the facilities, probably on a yearly basis.
Yes, yep.
Any questions for Lisa?
Yes.
Susan, yes.
Yes, Lisa, I was thinking about I remember when a lot of the cameras were installed on county buildings around, and one of the questions at that time is, at first I think we thought about it from the public's point of view as who's recording me and what are you going to do with it? But given some of the things that have happened, I know that it became the question of, as you said, who's looking at the cameras, who's monitoring, who's really responsible, because that's a huge part of security measures, is keeping on top of what's happening at all the buildings that have cameras and what you're monitoring them, actually seeing, looking at what's happening, identifying those situations that need to be taken care of, and then having the procedures and the staff to do it. So it's a lot of staff time. And, that's something that I've wondered about over the years. It sounds like you're preparing it may be some additional responsibilities that may have to be taken on that you're saying, right? It's protocols and connections with law enforcement, right?
Yes. And these are conversations that we've been having internally, and I just wanted to make this committee aware that security and safety has become a growing concern.
It is, and it's a huge amount of work. Thank you, and thank everybody for it, because it's one of those thankless tasks, but just, having had to deal with security issues and every library I've worked in, it is a huge job. It's a thankless job, but it's really important. So however I can help, I'm happy to serve on a committee or whatever for this.
Thank you.
Thanks, Susan. Anything further, Lisa?
I think that's it. Thank you.
Okay, you gave us a little bit of a preview. We've got Department of Planning and Sustainability, but it looks like it might be a combination here. Terry and Arel are going to join us at the table, and we have a report discussion item for Green Facilities Capital Planning Phase 2. Good morning.
Good morning. I know you've probably hardly slept since I teased this at Tuesday's meeting, so hopefully it lives up to the anticipation here. But so we're here to talk a little bit about Green Facilities Phase 2 and a proposed development for a second phase. Let's see. So the good news is Phase 1 is complete. We talked a little bit about what some of the projects were at that first phase on Tuesday, but to go over them again, geothermal at the Public Works facility, VRF system at mental health, heat pumps at the library, weatherization and insulation at multiple buildings, along with electric infrastructure upgrades, LED lighting, and water conservation. So it was a pretty comprehensive project. I think it touched almost every building that the county owns, and it's been great working with Johnson Controls through that process, and very happy to see that project just about wrapped up. So some phase 1 in numbers, it was contracted for around $14 million. That was an increase over what was originally anticipated, and a lot of that had to do with scope changes as well as inflation and part shortages. We were able to bring in some utility funding to help counteract some of that, so some through just regular energy efficiency programs, and then some in economic development in clean heat incentives and gas kickers. So recently we got a check from NYSEG for $200,000 as part of an economic development to get off of natural gas at the Public Works facility, and we're anticipating further funding once the project at mental health is fully complete. There's one or two more systems that are need to be commissioned, and then we'll be able to collect on some more funding from them. So we've been going after funding from the utility. We're currently in the process of seeking out Inflation Reduction Act funding. This is new funding that's never been able to be accessed by municipalities before. It's in the form of our tax credits, and obviously as a tax exempt entity, we've never been able to collect on that. The Inflation Reduction Act introduced something called direct pay or elective pay that enabled municipalities and other tax-exempt entities to collect on or to take direct payment of tax credits. And so we're in the process of pre-registering for that process, and then we will submit a specific form to collect on that funding. And so we hope to have that by the end of the year. But the reason why we've put a range there is that it's really difficult right now to understand exactly what's going to qualify and on what level, so we're still working through those details. And then there's the actual savings from the project itself. So we're expecting $100,000+ in utility cost savings, and then there's also the greenhouse gas reductions as well from undertaking a lot of electrification projects and energy efficiency. So then there's some context for phase 2, and I'll go through this a little bit, but maybe I'll turn it to Aurel, who can definitely speak more to this. But there's some HVAC replacements, some heating and cooling systems that are going to need replacements at our buildings over the course of the next 10 years. Most immediate is the Human Services building, which is in need of replacement quite soon. Shortly thereafter is the Department of Emergency Response, and then a little bit more on the horizon is public health. And then there's some deferred maintenance that's we're originally parts of phase 1 and got dropped from phase 1, but are in need of being done. And so a roof replacement at the public library, I think Aurel is estimated within the next 5 years, and then window replacements at mental health where they're underseeing current issues. So I don't know, Aurel, if you want to speak to any of those.
Yeah, the windows at the mental health building are original when it was constructed, so they're 31 years old. They're leaky, drafty, and we can't replace any of the hardware, so it's many of the windows there. There's a small portion, there's a large fixed window, but there's a small one. That's an operable windows, which most buildings that we do now we don't put in operable windows. Back then they did. And so a lot of the hardware we've had to basically screw shut, so you can't open the windows, but they're drafty and they're leaking. And so we've had it on our plan for probably the past 5 years, and we just keep kicking it down the road, but it's come to a point where we really need to address that. The roof at the library has already exceeded its warranty. We've not had any significant leaks throughout the building. It's really focused to one area that we've been able to repair. So that one, we would like to replace it. It is in our plan to replace in the next few years. The Human Services building, those boilers are original. The building was built in '97, so it's 27 years old. What I was telling Terry and Lisa is if they fail, we're going to replace them. We can't wait, so our hope is to get funding to do that, but if not, I will have to replace it and either come to the committee for contingency funding for that. It's always better to plan replacements than have to respond in the moment where you don't have such a good plan and you may not come up with the most efficient system to replace it with.
So the process that we've gone through is much the same as what we did with phase 1, working with Johnson Controls on a conceptual design, which has been completed. This has laid out the potential costs, savings, incentives for the different projects that we might undertake. We then worked with Johnson Controls to come up with a potential scope for a phase 2, which I'll be sharing shortly. What we're looking to do next is move into detailed design, which would provide the schematics and the concrete costs for a phase 2. And that would be, that detailed design process would be, 4 to 6 months with the hope of going into construction in 2025. And that construction process might take a year, it might take 2 years. It depends on the projects at hand. So the Phase 2 proposal itself, I'll go through kind of project by project, and then we'll have an overview at the very end. So this first one is the Human Services boiler replacement, which is what Arel was just talking about. We looked at 3 different scenarios: a ground source heat pump system, which at the end of the day was a little bit space prohibitive. The location there, it's in the city. There is no lawn to speak of. It's parking lots that we're looking at, and in that area, it's a lot of competing underground utilities as well as a shallow water aquifer that limits how deep you can go with a geothermal system. So at the end of the day, you could do ground source heat pumps. It would be incredibly expensive, and you probably wouldn't be able to meet the entire capacity that you would need for that building. So we felt that wasn't a particularly good option. We looked at air source heat pumps. Again, cost prohibitive. So we were looking at a $5 million project that would reduce the amount of natural gas in the building by 60%. So it wouldn't even get us off of natural gas. To get fully off of natural gas, we're not talking about, another $3-4 million. We're talking about even more, because it's a larger retro. It's, the 60% was tackling some of the easy to hit areas to get off of natural gas. To get to that last 40%, it would be a lot harder. So where we ended up was a boiler replacement. And so you can see some of the figures there, the initial costs, the rebates, the project development costs. So those project development costs is how much it would cost us to do the detailed design. And I'll talk a little bit about how that plays into things at the very end. But what we're suggesting for a Phase 2 here is to do a boiler replacement at this building, which is a little bit of a dilemma. It goes against some of what we've put out there in our goals for getting off of natural gas. We recognize that this is a very difficult building. It's something that we've had numerous conversations about and just haven't found a solution that really works. And I think especially understanding the timeline that it needs replacement in the very near future, we're kind of out of time looking or waiting for technologies that are maturing or trying to figure out other potential solutions. And so while installing a boiler continues the use of natural gas, I think we do so understanding that there are other options that we can utilize to try and get greenhouse gas savings from other options, from other optional improvements, and that in all likelihood, if New York continues the path that it's going with its policies, that this new boiler will likely be replaced before end of life. And I think that's something that we need to go into with our eyes open, that if we put this in, we're not talking about having a boiler in this building for 25 more years. It'll probably be 10 or 15 years if policies continue in the way that they're going. All right.
Question. So when was this building built?
97, so it's 27 years old.
Okay, and that's the original.
And those are original. Those are original boilers.
So a new boiler, I would assume, would be much more efficient than the one that's there now?
Yes.
Okay. What are the efficiencies of boilers these days? What?
The ones that are there.
90+%?
Yeah. The ones that are there at like 80 at best, but they're old, so it's probably not as efficient anymore.
Okay, thanks.
Right.
If it's essentially a like system swap, right?
That's what we're proposing.
Yeah, I mean, we have to replace pumps and variable speed drives, so there's a lot of other associated, but yeah, the bulk of it are the boilers.
So why are the development costs so high?
Yeah, if you go back to it, well, we have to re-engineer the building. We have units on each floor. We want to pipe it differently. So yeah, there's a lot more involved and on the control side as well. But yeah, that doesn't surprise me that, no, it's not just you just take it out and put it in. There's quite a bit more that we're looking at doing for efficiency of the system. It's not
just a replacement, it's
There are some comfort issues in the building as well, so I think it would be trying to address some of those.
Okay. Got it. It just stood out as, a lot.
Right.
I've been hearing something about a different technology, and I can't tell you the exact acronym, but it's VF something.
Oh, yeah.
And has that been looked at? Does it make any sense here?
Yes.
But apparently it's more energy efficient.
Well, actually, it's the VRF, variable refrigerant flow, and that's what we actually have already done or about done at the mental health building. And so basically it's using condensers, and so we eliminated our cooling tower, our heat pumps throughout the building and put in these VRF units throughout the building. It's the first one that we've ever done in the county. It did have some initial issues with it, but we did look at it for this building, but it would be one of the options that Terry was referring to. It'd be pretty costly to do that. We had really wanted to do ground source heat pumps. It's just not enough real estate to do that. We didn't want to do partial building, ground source and go to VRF system. That would be even more expensive to do, but the VRF system was looked at for this building.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that. Although I did hear that the refrigerant being used might be withdrawn from sale.
It depends. I know that it's the newer style refrigerant. It's some of the older ones, but I can't remember what type it is. But that was one question that we asked early on before we went to the VRF system for the mental health building.
So next up, we're talking about the Department of Emergency Response, and this proposal is for a geothermal system. So again, we looked at a couple of different options, and for this project, we did think a geothermal system was the best option to go for. Right now, the Inflation Reduction Act allows us to significantly reduce the cost of what it would be. The siting of wells at this location is not an issue. It is in line with the county's goals to reduce carbon emissions. And one thing that I wanted to know, and you can see it highlighted. So when this was originally submitted, I think if you look in your packet, it said that the earmark that was submitted would cover 50% of costs. We had a conversation with Senator Gillibrand's office, I believe it was, and they suggested that rather going for we were going with a certain opportunity through the Department of Energy, and they suggested a different opportunity with the actual emergency response kind of departments that exist at the federal level. And that is a more competitive process. We need to get more state support. But if we do get the state support, it would cover 75% of costs. So we're heading more in that direction is my understanding, and trying to get the state to support our efforts on that. So it would be a much greater reduction. That 75% of costs isn't reflected in the numbers that are below. This is what it would be if we didn't get any federal funding. So I want to make that clear. But that's what we have kind of earmarked. We've pegged for this specific building is going with a geothermal system.
Yes, I'm confused, if I could.
Yeah.
Please. You say we have to get, if they're offering 75%, what do we have to get the state on board about?
So for this specific opportunity, it requires to have dishes, so I don't know what that acronym stands for.
Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Services.
Yeah, so we need to have a letter from the State Dishes Office in support of what we are proposing. And so the actual opportunity is for building upgrades to emergency response facilities. And so right now we're trying to make the argument that this is an emergency response facility. Traditionally, I think they're looking more at like police stations and fire stations and things of that ilk. In my opinion, this is very much an emergency response center, but that's what we're waiting for, is to just get a letter of support from the State Dishes Office.
And it's because the federal funds would come through FEMA. So FEMA and then flow through dishes and the state level.
Yeah, I would think that because it's your emergency operations center and your emergency management programs, not so much the communication side, but the emergency management side, they ought to be able to support that. Well, that's ironic. Thank you. Gurrell, it seems like 20 years ago we built the building for just about what that project cost was.
Yeah.
Just 20 years
I wish we
ago.
were back in those days.
2.7 is, it's interesting that number is there.
Yeah, and that was high because it was so heavy on the electrical side, but you're right.
So this building was built about 20 years ago, or?
Yeah, it was 2004
or 5.
2004, yeah. I think we occupied 2004.
It would have been more if we'd gone with South Hill, which some people wanted to do.
Right.
And how big is this building, square footage wise, roughly?
You had to ask me that.
I'm just trying to get an idea of cost per square foot to do this upgrade. And would this upgrade include other things for energy efficiency, not just the
Yes.
geothermal system?
Yeah, I think it's 15,000, but don't quote me on that.
12,000 square feet
I think it's 15, but.
with the
in that
garage.
neighborhood. No, this would include, aside from the geothermal, we'd have to upgrade the generator because now it's all electric, and so we'd have to increase the size of the generator. So there's a lot of other associated costs, but the bulk of it is the well field and the heat pumps, and we would eliminate the chiller, which is failing. We actually had to replace 2 compressors, or in the process of doing that. Otherwise, we'd have to replace the chiller, and we didn't want to replace the chiller because that was probably $150,000. The boilers need replacement, so we're at the point where it's end of life for some of the critical systems, which we can't lose chillers for that facility. Otherwise, we lose all the communications equipment. So we're at a point where we need to do something. So if we don't do this, we would have to do chiller replacement and boiler replacements.
So the generator would be electric as well?
No, it would probably be a dual fuel generator.
Okay, yeah, because if you lose your grid, nobody responds, right? Okay, thanks.
Correct.
Is there opportunity in a project like this to upsize it a little bit to service any other of our facilities in the area?
Upsize the geothermal piece of it? Yeah, I mean, we've got the crash fire rescue, but I don't know what that will be used for once they move forward with the SRO project, but it's close enough that we could. We'd have to do a larger, well field. But yes, when they did the airport terminal project several years ago, they actually did the well fields and they picked up the new customs building as well as the terminal. They were close enough. So we could do an adjacent building like crash fire rescue, but I don't know what the uses will be once they move out.
What's the timeline on that? You've got a grant that's come through or they're working on a grant for the replacement of CFR or the building of a new crash fire facility.
I have to go back and look. The congressionally directed spending request is, I think we're expecting it next year.
So it's a little ways away yet. Mike, or Ralph, we had some talk at one point about a microgrid in that neighborhood. Did that kind of, was that not feasible?
No, because we never got any funding for that. But yes, you're right. Gosh, that's 5-6 years ago. It's been a while.
So I will say we are working with NYSERDA's Build Ready team. I mentioned this on Tuesday as well. So we have the Caswell project, but we also are exploring a project at the airport that would be a solar system plus some battery storage. And there's been some early conversations of could that tie into somehow a potential microgrid and offer some resiliency benefits to, for instance, the emergency response center as well as potentially airport operations.
Of course, resiliency is the key word when it comes to that building. There's just whatever you've got, it's got to it's got to be fail-proof.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, so the next series of projects are solar projects. So we're discussing solar canopies at 3 different locations. So the Public Works parking lot, the Human Services parking lot, and then the Public Health parking lot, the northern line that's above the charging stations. So that picture on the right is an example of a solar canopy. That's the one at our airport, so it would look similar to that. The reasons why we're bringing solar into this project is, one of the great reasons it helps insulate us from some of the rising utility rates. Last year, I gave a presentation about how between the NYSEG rate case and our energy supply contracts expiring and having to be renewed, we were looking at a 50% increase in energy costs. having our own solar would help defray some of the rising costs that we're seeing from the utilities and from the supply rates. It would be that locally produced renewable energy, and right now there really is some great incentives from the Inflation Reduction Act that make them more feasible than they've ever been before for municipalities to own. It used to be crazy for a municipality to buy one of these things and own it rather than lease it, but that was because the tax credit wasn't available to municipalities. Now that they are, the ownership is much more feasible. So,
Can I ask?
Yeah.
Why aren't the additional canopies for the airport parking on the list?
yeah, we've had some discussions with the New York State Public, NYPA, the New York Power Authority, and they've done an initial assessment, so we're discussing with them what that might look like. We've also talked with NYSERDA as part of their Build Ready program, bringing potentially the airport parking lots into that program. The reason it's not included in this specific scope is that it would be pretty expensive, I think, to do the entirety of the parking lot. And so we were aiming for a little bit smaller projects right now. But that's, I mean, that we have done some initial assessments of them.
Well, when they had the airport grant and they put up the existing canopy, it was supposed to be a demonstration.
Yeah.
And there wasn't money in that grant for more than one.
Yeah.
But couldn't they be done? You know, can you put in another one, for example, not put in the whole parking lot?
Yeah, we could certainly look at something like that. So these are some of the cost figures around some of the solar projects. So then in terms of the phase 2 proposal totals, we have some of that listed out. An initial cost of about $7 million, rebates of around $2 million, so project cost less rebates right over $5 million. The project development costs I have highlighted here. And the reason I have it highlighted is just so what ends up happening is if we engage in this project with Johnson Controls, they would start detailed design and we would not pay for anything. If after 12 to 18 months we did not enact any of, after the design was completed, we did not enter into an agreement with them to construct any of these projects, we would then be on the hook for the project development costs. And so, you know, by moving forward with detailed design, we are in essence committing to at least, you know, if we choose these projects, we are committing to $313,000 worth of design costs. Aurel, I don't know if there's anything you want to mention.
No, I mean, that we wouldn't be on the hook for until, you know, it'll be well over a year from now. And I'm trying to extend that 12 to 18 months to longer. If it seems like we want to move forward, but maybe not immediately, that we can do that. We've never had to pay the development costs. It always gets rolled into the project costs.
So before I'll show a kind of overview again at the very end, but there are some potential funding that we're looking for phase 2. So the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act incentives that I mentioned earlier that we're looking for, those are going to be rolled back into the Green Facilities Capital Fund once those come in. Similarly, those project utility rebates, we already have, of that $500,000, we already have a little over $250,000, and we're anticipating more once that mental health project is complete. And then this bottom one we haven't discussed yet, but it's the Clean Energy Communities funding. So that's a program that New York State offers that municipalities complete actions, and once they complete enough actions, they qualify for different amounts of money depending on how many actions they've completed. We feel like the county is well positioned to hit a few different of the markers that would in total add up to $825,000. The projects themselves have to significantly reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and so it does impact what projects we could use that funding for. So for instance, New York State has said we couldn't use that funding to do a boiler replacement, but it could be used, for instance, to go towards a solar project. So that's kind of where we have that earmarked for. So between all of these different incentives, we're looking at roughly a little over $2 million in possible funding already coming in for phase 2. And so if we take that initial cost, the outside funding that I just discussed, the possible rebates, what we're anticipating is probably a county share of around $3 million. So that's something that if you're looking for a price tag, I think we're looking at around the $3 million mark for what we'd be looking for. You'll note this proposal does not include the deferred maintenance projects at the library and mental health facility, so that is something that would have to be planned for in the future. And just another note that the current capital plan does not include any planned funding for green facilities, so this would be looking for adding it into the capital program in some way. The last thing that I'll mention is this was all submitted before some of what had happened at Peak and then was passed at the legislature on Tuesday, so that resolution that was passed on Tuesday did move funds from a lease option agreement with NYSERDA for the Caswell site into the Green Facilities Fund. My understanding is that payment would be around $110,000 a year. In talking with Norma, we believe the interest payment, the bond payments per year for a $3 million bond would be in the realm of $300,000. So it would possibly offset about a third of that. So I just wanted to note that as well. That lease option agreement, we wouldn't anticipate probably getting till towards the end of 2025, 2026. This project itself, as I said, wouldn't start until 2025, so we wouldn't begin payments until that point either.
Mike?
Terry, you may have answered what I'm going to ask already. I was going to ask if there was a logical place where this could be divided so that maybe we didn't do it all in one year. And you mentioned a couple of, you said the library project and something would not be done this year, so maybe that's the division, but we were talking a $7 million project, you got $2 million in grants, so that's $5 million, so.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to figure out how, and we got down to $3 million, so.
Yeah, so there are some timelines to be aware of. I mean, so the big one obviously is the boiler replacement for the Human Services building. I think if you take anything out of this, I think that's something that we need to move forward with more immediately. And so that was something that I think has to happen in 2025 at the very latest. You know, some of these other ones, the HVAC upgrade for the Emergency Response Center, if, you know, we were applying for the earmark now, we wouldn't hear until the end of this year. In contracting, it probably wouldn't take place until late 25, if not 2026 more likely. So, you know, that's a potential one that could be pushed back a little bit. You know, with regards to the solar, the Clean Energy Communities Program funding, we would be applying for it fairly soon because it is competitive, and we don't want to miss out on that potential opportunity. And so once we are designated for that funding, we have to submit a grant within 3 months, application for that funding within 3 months, and then that project would have to be done within 5 years. So we would be choosing one of these projects most likely to say we're putting that funding towards. And right now what we have it earmarked for is that solar PV at the health department, because once you look at the cost minus rebate, it's within that $825,000.
Randy?
Yeah, thank you for the presentation, and thanks for all your work on getting grants from all the things that are available. That's really important and complicated, I'm sure. Johnson Controls does all of our buildings, and they do all the design as well of all the systems?
Yes, I mean, they don't do the design themselves. They outsource that, so they're working with IPD. Not Ithaca Police Department, but it's an engineering and architectural firm out of Syracuse. But we actually weigh in on who they work with as far as designers, but it's basically turnkey. The beauty about these energy improvement projects, New York State allows them to be design build, which we save money in that respect, which we can't do on just like a Center for Government Building project. We'd like to do design build, but we can't. So that's the beauty of it. We've been doing projects with them since 2005. I think this one is by far the largest. The first initial couple of projects we did back in those years were like $2 million a piece. And this project, just to kind of some background, when we did the initial assessment maybe 5 years ago, we came up with a 3-phase approach to the project. And when we presented to the legislature maybe 3 years ago, we indicated each phase and the cost for each phase. When we started phase 1, or just before, when we had after we did the detailed engineering, we came up with more detailed numbers. this is around COVID and all of that, and so the increase, it was initially like 7.5 million. We requested additional funding, about 7 million. The majority of that, 70% of that increase, was not inflation or shortages. It was really scope. Since the project had taken longer to get to that point, we actually added some phase 2 projects into the phase 1 because we couldn't wait that long. Mental health was one of them. We had to get some work done. The library was actually more important than that. So that accounted for 70% of that increase. The rest was inflation and shortages. And so phase 2, back when we had initially proposed it, we were planning to do projects because we knew that end of life would be about then. So now that we're pushing some of these projects back, we have to consider, do we move forward with the phase 2, or does it then come back as a capital project that I would have to request funding? So either way, for some of these, we're going to have to pay for it. And so that's what I've repeated many times as we've met with county administration, with Terry and the group. What has been great with Terry is he's been involved all the years that he started here. How long has it been here now?
It's almost 3, yeah.
3 years. He's been attending and sitting in these meetings with Johnson Controls in our projects and helping to make decisions of how to package these projects, because the true phase 2 that we had initially proposed as part of scope is $26 million. So this is just a portion of it. There are things here in the original phase 2 that we've had to push off to later years. And that's what we're trying to say. This is important. We need to do these, at least those first 2, but we're trying to package it in a way to take advantage of some of the funding that we can get back, which the solar PV allows that.
Yeah, thank you for, that was one of my questions, so I'll cross that one off. Johnson Controls, first-class company, they're the largest car battery manufacturer in USA.
Yeah.
So sure, I've been to those factories. Fascinating. We talked about data that we're getting from NYSEG, which was incomplete. And I brought it up at the legislature meeting as well. Johnson Controls is in all of our buildings, and we can't seem to get from NYSEG the true usage data going back some years. Johnson Controls systems don't track usage in any way?
They do. Actually, in some of our larger buildings, we have meters for electric and for gas. And we've had those for many years. And we've actually upgraded those as part of our phase 1 project. So yes, we can use that, but it's not this, then you've got to reconcile that against NYSEG's numbers. I have a hard time understanding why we can't get more up-to-date data from NYSEG, because they've got their pulse meters and all of that, and at least all the literature you get in your homes, you can get instantaneous usage for your residences. But I know Terry has been dealing with that at least these last 3 years, trying to get more current data on that. But yes, in our larger buildings, we do read our electric usage and also our gas usage, but not every building.
Well, it's unacceptable. Nice they can't give us this data. They have it. It just requires work.
Exactly.
And if you need somebody to be a real jerk about that, I'll be glad to help. When you talked about your capital plan, so is there an existing green facilities capital plan?
I can respond to that. We had originally, I can't remember if it was in the 2020 budget, 2021 budget, green facilities capital projects in 3 phases over a period of time. And so we've and they bundled these projects. So phase 1, we committed to, and then the cost of phase 1 just about doubled, and for the reasons Arel and Terry mentioned. So in doing that, that then caused us with the other pieces in our capital plan to have to defer phases 2 and 3 beyond the 5 years in order for us to fit all of the other projects in and contain the costs.
On that point, I think you had an initial price, I think, for all phases of around $7 million, and it came back 14.
That was for phase one.
That was just phase one.
Yep.
The total was around 30 million.
To get to all three
we had
phases.
It set up so that you could see the subsequent phases and the costs. But then when we had to increase the initial one, I think that threw kind of things out of order because of the other projects.
Did we end up going to the 14 from?
Yes.
We did. That was one of the earliest votes when
Right.
Greg and I came on here, and Randy. Okay.
Yep.
All right, and then we stopped. What would have taken us
That's correct.
to that much larger number? But to get to phase two now, just as a way of review, is another $7 million, but potentially two and a half in grants that may offset some of that.
Yes.
And rebates. So its total county funding would be about 2.9 million
I have one more question.
if we were successful in all the grants and rebates.
Yes.
That's correct. Okay.
Thanks. Randy, you had one more question, and I see hands from Greg and Mike here.
No, I was pointing out to Ann, has her hand up.
Ann has. Okay. Hi, Ann. We'll be right with you.
Last question. So you mentioned you're getting grant funds back. Does that go into a reserve fund for these projects? So it goes into your green capital fund, if I heard you correctly. So is there a fund set up that this money is going into, or is it going specifically for that?
My understanding is any funding that we would receive toward a particular project would go toward that project to reduce the amount that we would need to bond for that project.
Okay, but if we've already spent the money, now we're getting grants later on, is that you're getting like you got a $50,000 payment, so does that just offset the bond? I mean, I'm trying to understand,
So
where's that money go?
The funding that we've received thus far from the utility rebates has gone back into a green facilities capital fund. So there is some amount of money in the green facilities capital fund. I don't know offhand how much exactly it is.
Okay, it'd be good to know that at some point, but I'm done, thanks.
Thanks, Randy. Greg?
Just out of curiosity, why does New York State not allow us to do design build?
Good question. I don't know. We've wanted to do that. Other states allow that
Yeah. It's a
design
much more
build. It
efficient
saves
way
money. Oh, yeah.
A lot.
Yeah.
There was a proposal in the climate action plan that New York State put forward to allow design build in general. I don't know that it's gone anywhere, but it's been brought up as allowing municipalities to do that.
Well, if Assemblymember Kellis and Senator Webb are watching our committee meeting this morning as they wade through budget issues, maybe they could bring that up as a legislative topic for next session. How much is the window replacement at mental health? Do you have an estimate for that?
I can pull up some numbers here.
And then I would also be curious to some of Randy's line of questioning on just understanding the green building capital funds available. I know there's been sort of none in that earmark, but if rebates are getting credited to account or other grants, if there is anything available in the budget, it'd be good to know that. If not, that's an okay answer too. And then also, are there any funds within our regular course of an annual budget? I'm looking maybe at Arel in your budget that you have reserved for replacement, contingency, those type of things. Do those get 100% utilized every year, or can some of those offset some of these more immediate projects like the short-term boiler replacement? Is that something that could, maybe borrow 50,000 from there or 75,000 from there to reduce bonding exposure?
Yes. So we have, I know at a previous meeting, I don't know if it's last month or month before, about just, we have a capital fund, it's 1.4 million annually, that it's called Building Restoration Fund. So it really takes care of capital maintenance replacement. So that is really focused on anything that's not energy related, because we can benefit putting any energy project as part of these green facilities because of the design build. But any other project, could be like window replacements, roof replacements, the work that we're doing currently around the court complex, masonry replacement, those fall under this other project. It's 1.4, so it's not a lot of money to accomplish some of these projects. So typically, a boiler could take most of that funding away. And so we've, in the past, I'm talking back in the early 2000s, that's the way it worked. It was all came out of my operating. If we did have a failure, I'd have to come to the legislature for contingency funding. And so we set up this account where we get, it used to be 3 years, we'd get funding and then 2-year pause in 3 years. And I said, you know, in order to keep up, because we just kept deferring the maintenance, to have an annual 1.4 million. So we could, but that would not cover, like we have a roof replacement for our public works facility that is over $1 million. That would take all of that funding, essentially. The windows.
To add on to that, so the windows, as you asked, is just under $1.9 million for the window replacement at mental health. And then the roof replacement for the public library that wasn't included in our proposal is just over $1 million. It's $1,054,000.
Right, so those are large enough that they would basically decimate our kind of annual maintenance capital funding.
Yeah, I'm not asking to wipe those out, but, you know, think creatively about the capital stack in some way. You know, can we give and take a little bit to achieve the overall goal?
Yeah.
Okay, I think this is really important. I think any opportunity we have to leverage bond funding, if it makes, you know, sense with, you know, and that's why I was a strong supporter of the Caswell Solar, because what that money would potentially allow us to do. So I think we should look for a path to move forward, but understand the, you know, economic conditions, but continue to make this a priority.
Thanks, Greg. Legislator Ann Corman is with us remotely, and I see a hand up there.
Thanks, Lee. I wanted to thank everybody for the robust discussion and the presentation by Arel and Terry, and also just a shout out to say happy birthday to Greg, and thank him for giving us the idea to divert the Caswell solar funds towards the green facilities projects. And so my question is along those lines, is for possibly Terry, that you mentioned that there might be another project down the line from NYSERDA to do a PV installation on one of our properties. Do you have, did you want to mention that again? Because I'm wondering if that's a place where we could also.
Yeah, that one's a little bit of a tricky situation. So I mentioned that we are doing a build-ready project with NYSERDA at the airport. Because it is airport lands, the FAA is very stringent on what they'll let go from the airport in order to allow certain purposes. And so my understanding in talking with the airport and in talking with their consultants is the FAA would only allow that project to go forward if it knew that the funds were going to return to the airport in some capacity. So if that project does move forward at the airport, the funds will have to be given back to the airport in some manner.
Okay, thank you very much. That's all I had.
Thanks, Ann. Mike?
Just a couple of things. One, just remember we have a public works project in the wings that we need to, I say public works, a public safety project in the wings that we have to think about as well. And that got shelved this year for the Center of Government building, but it is out there waiting for us, and we can't continue to ignore that. The other thing I wanted to mention, this is just my personal opinion, and I certainly understand the HVAC engineering reasons for designing buildings with non-operable windows, but I think it's improper to expect any employees to be in buildings that don't have inoperable, that have inoperable building windows. I think they ought to be able to open a window.
Thanks, Mike. Points noted. Any further questions for Terry and Arel? Appreciate the completeness of your report this morning. You do end with, would like to begin phase 2 detailed design. And Lisa, are we looking for a motion to come forward from the committee, or just a nod of the head here to head in that direction?
Well, we did not bring a resolution forward for it. I believe, Arel, you have the funding currently to go forward with this. And if he does, it's with the understanding that if we move forward with these projects, that those funds would be used toward those projects. If we determine later on in the budget process that we're not moving forward, we would be on the hook for those funds. So I think it's just to make this committee aware and get your take on that.
Thanks, Lisa. Greg?
If we didn't move forward with the projects, would those funds then come out of the budget, Arel, which you oversee?
Yes, so the 313, the development costs, we would sign it's called a project development agreement, which really commits us to just that. And in the agreement it says if we do not move forward with implementation after a period of time, I'm going to push for 24 months, then we would be on the hook for that. I have indicated to Lisa and Terry that I could cover that for now out of my budget. My hope is that we move forward eventually, and then that gets wrapped into the capital project that is part of the Green Facilities Capital.
So essentially, we have to set aside, commit those funds because there's the contractual obligation that they could potentially be needed.
Yes.
So those would come out of your budget somewhere?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm comfortable moving forward with that because we need to have the design work done to really actually understand the full cost, so. But I'm just one person.
I kind of agree with that. And I'm definitely agreeing with Greg that, we should be looking at our bonding and really what we can do with that. But really it comes down to the capital plan. I'm sure we'll get that as part of our budget process. And I think that, when we understand our bonding and our cost and that maybe that allows us to move some things quicker, right? Or slower, but understanding that would be helpful as we move forward.
On the back of my mind is the $500,000 out of contingency if the boilers go at HSB. So I think you've got a threat either way. You need to keep moving forward. So I'm okay. Mike?
Yes, certainly. I remember what happened when the chiller froze, and we had to do it real fast.
Never goes in the right time of year either.
Right.
Okay. Anything further?
No. Happy birthday, Greg.
Thanks. Happy birthday.
Thank you. That was great.
Thank you. Yeah, no, this has been a very good conversation for the committee, and I think it helps, kind of lays out the beginnings of a path for the next several years, especially in relation to the capital program. And Mike, thanks for the admonition on Warren Road. Just time check, we're at a little after 10 o'clock and a few more department reports to go. Well, let's move ahead. Jeff Smith is with us, Highway Department. It appears he's got a couple of informational items here. Good morning, Jeff.
Good morning, everyone. Good to see you all. Yeah, we have a couple, no action items for the committee today. We have a couple of information only. One is the capital payment summary, and then the other is the quarterly status report. I can answer questions as you look over them. If you see something after today that you have a question on, please certainly reach out. I'm happy to get an answer for anything in these reports.
Were you online for our public comment section?
Yep, I was here. I heard that.
Are you, is that an item for next month's?
It's likely going to be an item. We have not received the report. It was due, the original schedule for the completion of the report was due April 15th. That's the schedule that we mapped out. I did reach out to to Barton LaJue this Monday for an update. I heard yesterday that the report is in draft form. We should be seeing something early next week. We'll be looking at it and sharing it. So it's likely that there'll be a report at next month's committee meeting. I would be quite sure of that.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. Any questions for Jeff on capital payment or quarterly highway, or any highlights you got for us there? We've seen these before. Mike?
I just wanted to, on the Craft Road report that's coming in, and we heard public comment on it. I thought there were some inaccuracies in the public comment as to what we were asking for this report to cover. So I'm going to be very interested in seeing that report and seeing how it responded to what we requested.
Thanks, Mike.
Got a question? Hi, Jeff.
Hi.
I assume you use as much salt as you planned this year. Is that true? And are we obligated to purchase a certain amount of salt, and regardless if we use it? Is that correct? Or
when you when you buy your salt, rock salt, off of OGS bid, you have to submit your estimated amounts this time of year. You don't find out what the cost is until sometime towards the fall. The cost this year on OGS went down for the last winter we just came through. The OGS bid works in that if you give them a number of total tons used, it used to be you had to order or buy, I think this is what you're asking, at a minimum of 70% of what your order is. And then they would also hold that price for up to 120%. That has been that way for many years. The OGS, some of the difficulty in estimating and then not knowing the cost, feedback from a lot of customers has changed the specifications of the OGS bid as recently as just this year, and they lowered the minimum requirement to 50%, and then they actually raised the overage to, I think, 130. So that gives us, and for instance, we have for many years pre-ordered or got into the ring or the arena of the OGS bid at a amount of 7,000 tons of salt. We are, in the old way, we would have had to purchase 70%. This year, we've only had to purchase 50% of that, and we are done buying any requirements as far as that project at this point. And we have a full salt barn. The winter has been very light, as you stated.
thank you.
Yep.
Any questions for Jeff? Any other questions? Mike?
Jeff, at the ITCTC meeting, we talked about some funds, grant funds being shifted to the Falls Road culvert project. And is there any update on that?
Yeah, the Falls Road, it's a triple box. It's in the quarterly status report. I'm leafing through it. It is on packet page 26. You're talking about Fall Creek Road?
No, I'm talking about Falls Road up on up by Teganic. Okay, that may be just a shifting of the dollars. There were several projects competing, and they picked that one. It's all right.
Bridge New York Award?
Yes.
That's the first I'm hearing of it.
Yeah, it was Bridge New York.
We submitted that bridge for a Bridge New York Award early this year, January of 24. We haven't heard anything on any awards or shifting fund. It's not an existing project. It's in our capital plan.
Yeah.
And we're awaiting to hear from New York. So I don't know what would have been moving around. I will have to find out what.
Yeah, Fernando was here a little while ago, but I guess we've lost him. So I was going to mention it. He knows about it.
Yeah, I haven't heard of any Bridge New York awards. coming out.
Oh, here's Fernando back. Fernando, I was just asking about the shift of the Bridge New York money for the Falls Road culvert.
Right. So
and,
sorry, I was watching on the on the internet. The Bridge New York process is one where you apply and you get selected. And what happened is we went through an evaluation of projects, and DOT and the Transportation Council have agreed to forward the Falls Road project for funding, but it's not quite finalized yet.
Okay. There was some extra money that could be available, as I understand it. Is that right? From the state?
No, the state, so this recommendation now goes to main office, DOT, and they eventually select projects.
All right.
So the selection process is not complete.
Okay.
It has to go through the statewide evaluation or selection at this point.
All right.
What they have is a recommendation.
I didn't understand the process.
Yeah, they have a recommendation from the council and from Region 3 of DOT.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, the region and the MPO was allotted a certain amount of funding through the Bridge New York grant program. And then there's a local committee scoring various projects that were submitted in the committee. And then they could make recommendations coming out of that scoring on what they preferred as far as their priorities. I think that's what has probably just happened.
It is. And
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And ITC, the policy committee recommended that this culvert be moved forward.
That's
good news. That's great news.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks. Sorry, didn't confuse matters more, but
no, it's good.
I thought it was good news.
Yeah, it is. It's a good step.
Thanks, Mike, Jeff, Fernando. Thanks for coming back.
Thanks, Fernando.
Shall we move on? Okay, transportation. See you later, Jeff.
Come on up.
Transportation equity needs in Tompkins County is our topic, and
Morning. I'm just going to plug in.
going to keep you waiting here.
It's all right, my battery's just...
It looked like a light agenda this morning, but we're covering quite a bit of ground.
Just have her pull Amanda's nameplate down. Once you get set up, if you could pull the nameplate in front of you down. Thank you.
Thanks, Frank.
That way nobody gets confused.
Okay, yeah. Okay. Okay, good morning. I'm Dawn Montagna, and I'm the Environment Issue Lead with Cornell Cooperative Extension, Tompkins County. And I'm going to talk to you this morning both about our Way to Go transportation program and the results of a transportation equity needs assessment that we did with a number of partners, transportation partners in the county as well. So Way to Go is Tompkins County's transportation, education, and information program. We've been around since 2008. We've got Melanie McMurray, who's our team leader, who's sitting back here. We've got two transportation educators for the county. We have a communications coordinator, and we have a regional transportation manager. And I'll talk a little bit more about her in that program in a little bit. We get funding from New York State DOT, match from Cooperative Extension's administration funds. And we support a number of county programs in terms of this transportation information, both in terms of supporting housing, workforce development, recovery, aging sector. So what we do is we provide transportation and information about the different transportation services that exist in the county. We also connect these information resources to users. We do education and training programs. We identify needs and gaps, and we work with other partners in the county, service providers, to help fill those gaps, and we convene different entities to create new solutions. So I want to talk a little bit about each one of these aspects. We do a number of events in the community to share transportation resources. That includes Streets Alive, it includes Ithaca Festival. We do smaller job fairs where we might get involved with individuals to develop transportation itineraries that are customized. One particular program we have is with Ithaca City School District. We work with each of the schools. There's a transportation liaison, which in each of these schools that we train, and we support their staff people that also take on this role, so we also support them with a stipend. We've been working with them to distribute transportation information and also free TCAT cards for all middle and high schoolers within the city school district. So far, we've distributed over 800 of these passes. We also work to distribute passes to adults, caregivers who need to get to after-school meetings, appointments with teachers, events, where they don't have transportation access, they don't have resources. So one of the things that we know is that if students can't participate in after-school activities, they don't do as well in school. So we don't want transportation to be a barrier, which is one of the reasons we put a lot of effort into this program. And you can see one of our transportation liaisons down here on the bottom left. Again, we have 12 liaisons, one in each of the schools in the Ithaca City School District, and we hope to expand to other school districts in the county. We also have a website that we have one right now, and we're developing one that's a bit more simplified, a little bit more direct. I just wanna, it won't actually let me switch. That's okay. I will give you a link to the website. Now I have to get out of it. So yes, we're developing a more simplified website, just like very quickly you can click if you need information on a bicycle, emergency services, services for those with disabilities, seniors, et cetera. So we get a number of hits to our website, and we also contract with 211 to field transportation related calls. And you see over 1,000 plus callers are met annually through those referrals. Our education and training program specifically is focused on workshops where we get involved with a number of different organizations such as GIAC. They have a program for hospitality where we go in and provide information on the various transportation resources. So again, for those that might face barriers. We have a module that we work with for workforce development. There are a couple of workforce development programs in the county, and we go in and we talk to them also about different transportation options. One thing we piloted last fall or in winter was our travel training program, which is helping individuals experience new transportation modes. So oftentimes people don't use the bus or don't use the car share because they're nervous about how it works. They don't know how to read the schedule. They don't know how much it costs. So we actually go with them. We work with them in groups to understand that particular service mode, and we usually take a trip with them. This past winter, we worked with 23 participants from McGraw House Senior Living. And then we also have a car buyer training workshop where we help people who are particularly low income, who are interested in buying a secondhand vehicle, talk to them about what are the ins and outs of buying a used vehicle, and also talk about electric vehicle options. I mentioned also we create these conversations, convene conversations to create solutions. Move Together New York is our regional program. We work with 6 counties, that's in the green there, primarily focused on connecting transit routes, transit operators. And then the yellow counties you can see jumped in to say we would like to be involved as well in your Move Together New York program when we first kicked it off. One of the successes we're having, we're working right now with Cortland Transit and TCAT to make sure that the schedules are synced up. So at TC3, it was that TCAT would leave a couple of minutes before the Cortland County bus came in, and people weren't able to make that transfer to move out of the county if they needed to. So we have done something that would seem simple, but was not happening, which was to help coordinate those schedules, help coordinate additional stops. And what that's helping to do is move workers into the county that are outside of the county and don't have transportation, people who might come in for healthcare services, who might be coming in for education. It can be difficult moving across the county if you're using transit because they stop at county lines. So the purpose here is to help make those connections. And lastly, in terms of what Way to Go does, we identify these needs and service gaps, and that leads me to the discussion about the Transportation Equity Needs Assessment. So that's the portion on what Way to Go does in terms of cooperative extensions work on transportation. In talking about the Transportation Equity Needs Assessment, which we refer to as TINA, so you will see TINA in other slides. What we wanted to do with a number of our partners, and I'll talk about an organization that we have now, a loose affiliation of our partners, which is the Transportation Equity Coalition, is we wanted to look across the county and really get a full picture of what the transportation barriers people are facing. How easy is it to get around the county? How hard is it to get around the county? And for who? So these are the collaborators. You can see they're essentially the transportation service providers in the county, as well as those that address policy, that address education. And again, these are the current members for the Transportation Equity Coalition, which was, we founded in 2022. No, 2020, sorry, 2020. It was in 2022 that we started the Transportation Equity Needs Assessment. And you can see we have various state, federal funding, private funding that has supported the needs assessment over the last 2 years. And so essentially what I'm talking to you here today about for really the very first time are the results that came out of that 2-year assessment. So through the equity needs assessment, the TINA, again, what we wanted to understand was people's experience with connectivity, the strengths of the transportation system, barriers, and then solutions. We wanted to specifically focus on asking underserved communities, those that often we don't hear voices from that are sort of struggling with barriers, but often in silence, to see how easy it was to access key services, opportunities, and amenities. So I wanted to here identify who we determined were the underserved, and this identification, because you see there are multiple aspects of who we identified as underserved. Much of that coming from Way to Go and other transportation service providers and 211, their experience in terms of who are usually noting that they're facing barriers. And here we also defined low income as annual household income from 2022 of less than $50,000. So the TINA process, again, was 2 years, and what I want you to get out of this is, and you can look, some of them are more bold than others, that we deeply involved the community in this process, not just in terms of asking them to answer a survey, but we convened a planning group. We've got a planning group member here. We've got a couple of members online from around the county to help us think about how we want to do the assessment, who we want to ask, what kind of language do we want to use that's going to be accessible, how are we going to get the transportation surveys out to folks, what kind of questions we want to ask in a focus group. And then we had 35 members from around the county participate in focus groups specifically designed to say, you know, are you a member of the LGBTQ community? Are you a member of the BIPOC community? Are you a member of a community of people with disabilities? And we got those groups together to specifically talk about their challenges, how they're dealing with transportation aspects and getting around the county, getting to key services. And then we also involved the planning group and looking at the results and seeing, you know, do these results make sense? Do they resonate with you? And then we had a number of community organizations come together last month, about 45 of them, to come up with some recommendations looking at the results. So what we thought very encouraging about our process was that we received and analyzed 2,146 surveys from around the county. We looked at, again, income is a very important piece of this. We broke up underserved into income and not, low income and not, underserved and not underserved in terms of income. And this is actually a correction from the slide so that you have, I think you had 60% whereas I identified as underserved, and that was incorrect. It's actually 83.3% identified as underserved, with almost 40% of those being low income and underserved in terms of those who answered the survey and actually answered the income question. So we had, which is what we wanted. We wanted a disproportionate amount of folks who are potentially struggling with transportation. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the findings, specifically in terms of connectivity. You'll see that the majority of folks found that moving around the county was either easy or somewhat easy. What I really want us to look at, though, is the fact that over 20% of the low-income, underserved respondents indicated that getting around the county is hard or very hard. I'm going to talk a little bit in the next slide how many people in the county also drive, which won't be surprising to you, and which is understandable why they might find it easy or somewhat easy. But it's really important to look at that 20% that are really struggling.
How many people is 20%?
Oh, how many people is 20% of our? So I'd have to look here. So 20% of the, I think I said low income, low income underserved. So it's 20% of the 40% of the 2,146. So let's say that's 1,000, and then you've got, so.
All right, so we're talking about 20% of the survey respondents who are low income.
Yes.
Okay.
Low income underserved.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay, I think that was that one. So in terms of strengths, and we asked, do any of these transportation options currently work well for you? You could see that for everyone except the low-income underserved, people were primarily using their personal vehicle. And then if you look at low-income underserved, it's the bus, it's TCAT that folks are saying work well for them. Walking had a significant response in all groups. And then I do want to point out, even though this was a strengths question, we asked folks if they wanted to elaborate. And if people elaborated, about 36%, almost 200, talked about barriers. So while they said things worked well from them, they also identified that there were barriers associated with their transportation, preferred transportation option. And that half of those were mentioned just barriers with TCAT, with using TCAT. So now in terms of the direct barrier question, we asked people what are the 3 difficulties in getting around Tompkins County. So for low-income underserved, which again we're focusing on, the top difficulty was no buses when needed, followed by no car or can't drive. So I want to elaborate just a little bit on no car, can't drive, when we understand this from some of the information that people included when they could write in or elaborate on their answers. Can't drive can be seniors who don't have the ability to drive anymore, which can leave them isolated. Can't drive can also be people coming out of incarceration who don't have the ability to drive or to get a license. It could also be that the costs are prohibitive to actually getting a license for somebody. And no car is, I think, straightforward in terms of not having a car available. Underserved low-income respondents were also almost twice as likely to report experiencing discrimination as their not underserved counterparts. If you talk about the folks that are driving, they're noting that the challenges are too much traffic and not enough parking. Yes?
We've talked about opportunities to help people get funding for bus passes and things like that. Mm-hmm. Is there any opportunity to help those that potentially can't afford the initial costs of obtaining a driver's license? Is there opportunity for that, or is there funding available for those type of activities?
That's a good question. We sort of understanding this for the first time for me, not for necessarily people that are trying to get a license. It's something that we need to think about. Can we through cooperative extension potentially offer some educational programs that have driver ed, a car available? It was really an interesting learning, because if you don't have a family member or you don't have the history of people in your family that are able to drive, you need to pay someone to teach you, you need to rent the car, you need to pay for gas, and all of this gets incredibly expensive. So it would be interesting, to look at a program like this. I will say and I think it's important because many people do need a car, but we are also, in terms of transportation managers, educated, trying to get people out of sort of the drive alone situation. But absolutely, especially with our large rural areas, there are some people that absolutely need to have a car. Yes.
Just a quick question. Discrimination, in what form? Are there examples given of how they feel discriminated?
Yeah, I'll give a couple of examples. So some folks with disabilities trying to ride the bus face discrimination. In some cases, whether it was intended as discrimination or not, sometimes there's real anxiety by the bus drivers to keep things moving because they need to keep on schedule. So there's a real thought that there isn't the understanding of people with disabilities and what they need to go through. So the system isn't really set up in terms of, trying to make a schedule, not fully set up to accommodate fully and to completely respect the people that might actually be struggling with a physical disability or a mental disability. And then there were some examples of race discrimination, I think both in terms of TCAT in some cases, and then also in terms of taxi in some cases, I recall.
Okay.
We could dig into some more detail because that wouldn't be everything.
Looking for some context there on
Yep.
how that would be portrayed.
Okay.
Mike?
I just wanted to, I noticed the big red bar for parking, and I realize that our efforts may not be for helping the single driver vehicle, but there's a lot of them. And I think looking at that issue of having difficulty finding parking is important.
And the cost of it, too. That's a big part of it.
Yes.
Yeah, and we also, within the transportation sector, think about how can we, and I know that I'm trying to think, Downtown Ithaca Association thinks about how do we DIA, remove, not have so much congestion and parking downtown so they can have visitors come in. So there's a program, Go Ithaca, that's actually set up to incentivize folks to use more of the bus option, to potentially do a park and ride, to potentially use a ride share option. So I think we should look at probably a number of things rather than necessarily investing in more parking. I think we have, especially if we're talking about greenhouse gas emissions and and I just want to point out that if we can get more people using shared transportation, it would make more of a robust system that actually would allow all those that are struggling with transportation as well to be able to use the system that could be more effective and more efficient.
People in my area in Dryden, they don't come to Ithaca because they can't park, and they don't want to park in the parking garages. They're afraid of them.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I don't blame them. Plus, Ithaca city policies, for example, of giving away or renting away the most easily accessed parking areas in the parking garages is a real problem for people. So they just don't come. They go to Cortland.
Right.
And where there are lots of parking lots and around the stores, and they don't have to go through the heavy traffic congestion of Fulton Street and that thing to get out to the southwest area of the city. So that's why I'm pointing that out.
Right.
And one other question I had: where on your table are people who take taxis and/or Ubers?
Right, so that is included in, I'm trying to think of the category because they are in there, so rideshare, which includes taxi, Uber, and Lyft.
Okay.
Okay. So I was just asked a question about the folks coming from Dryden. So these would be people who would be shopping or people who not necessarily working?
Both.
Okay.
When I grew up, everyone came to Ithaca and shopped.
Right.
Not anymore.
Yeah, I think some of the focus on trying to get some of the parking freed up is to get those folks that are working kind of on a regular schedule tied into a little bit more of an alternative transportation model. So that people who might come on a one-off and want to come shop could actually have the ability to come and park.
It extends to that whole corner of the county. Groton's in kind of the same boat. And I'll tell you the other difficulty that, just something to think about. I was pleased to hear of the work with the connections through TC3 to link and be able to bring people into Tompkins, but we kind of have a reverse issue too, and a lot comes to our seniors and even lower income folks that live out that way. They, by proximity, they use the Cortland Hospital, they use the doctors and pharmacies over there, and that is in the fact that there isn't a direct route to Cortland and an inability for Gadabout and others to cross those lines. It does create a problem, and if we take somebody to the hospital and the spouse, they can't get there. And,
right.
And so that's one form of transportation difficulty that's out there that really affects one of the populations that we're looking at here.
So
or two or three of them, actually.
I will say that TCAT did try a on-demand bus service in Dryden, which was essentially, you get an app on your phone and you can schedule a bus. You could schedule a bus to come to pick you up at your home. I'm not sure people thought it was actually going to work. We did it in Lansing, we did it in Dryden. In Lansing, we actually took, not we, but as a transportation community, we took away the fixed route. So a lot of people who were using the bus, they did use the on-demand because the line went away. In Dryden, we didn't. So part of this is also changing behavior and becoming more comfortable. A number of us are looking at and thinking about what about more on-demand shuttle service, so smaller, more flexible, smaller buses rather than, the full-size TCAT, but that could potentially cover more of the region. We have examples around the country of, small urban and rural areas where you've got a robust volunteer driver system, you've got a van pool system, you've got, I think, Randy, you know of an example too of some in Minnesota, is it? You pay a flat fee every month and then you can get picked up for a shuttle. So it's how do we, invest in and develop those resources. I think there's a lot to be said here also in terms of a workforce development component. So importantly, I wanted to mention the effects of barriers. So you can see that stress is actually the highest effect from the barriers across the board, and which of course has mental and physical health implications. Limited autonomy is an important response for both underserved groups. You can see late missed appointments. It also shows up high for underserved low income, but then also for those that are not low income. Not underserved low income also highlighted that it was expensive. Oftentimes those are folks that are using multiple modes. So then solutions and recommendations. What we did here was we took the solutions that were identified in the survey. So from those 2,000 plus folks, and then I mentioned earlier that we had a meeting of about 45 organizations represented who support the county across sectors, come up with recommendations. So this is really a combination of the two. Oh, look, it's not showing up. That's not good.
No solutions.
Well, there are solutions.
In our packet, we can see them.
Okay, so you can see them in your packet. I can't see them, but I know what they are, I think. So sorry to those of you online. And in fact, if you want me to try to dig it up, I can. I'm not sure where it is. But the main recommendation that came across the board was better bus service. So this wasn't just for low-income underserved. This was actually for those that were not underserved, those that drove, that gives the sense that if we had a more robust bus service, that folks would use it. That's a question we would have to ask out there, but it's very interesting to me that everybody across the board said better bus service. And then there were a number of different aspects in that in terms of better pay for drivers, more robust routes, and the timing, 24-hour time if possible. But, you know, people who work shift, we hear from all the time, early shifts, late shifts, if they use the bus and they can't get home, that gets very challenging. Then we also saw primarily multiple, let's see, maybe you could tell me, multiple modes of transportation, van pool shuttle service, particularly coming up from rural participants. And, okay, she gave me the answer, but I don't want to throw me off. That's good. Thank you. On-demand shuttle services, particularly for rural areas, improved walking infrastructure, and a lot of the infrastructure for walking really focused on safety. So it really had to do with having lights, having markings. Safety was a huge part. And then also a bike lane network where the safety around biking was also very important. And then subsidized or free transportation. So I don't know if you're seeing anything on your list that you might want to ask a question about, but yes.
I guess one of the, as you talked about safety and walking and lighting and things like that, does it ever come up? I know like Cornell, they did a lot of lighting improvements when I was a staff person there and did the blue light system and things like that. Is there any conversation that comes up when you talk about walkable infrastructure on connectivity or increased, safety or, those type of integrations into heavily trafficked walking areas or things like that for like a blue light or an integration with, law enforcement or support services so people have a greater feeling of safety?
Well, in terms of the survey, it didn't get as specific as that.
Yeah.
I would say really that I think there were a few things that are mentioned there on the sheet in terms of lighting, but I would also say that the folks, that's kind of our job here, and potentially with your input and support too, to really look at kind of what are the best practices. I think a lot of folks know that they don't feel safe. And they're not always quite sure how to fix that. And I think we've got to look at that and say what are the best ways to do that work.
Thank you.
Okay, so next steps for the needs assessment. This is kind of our kickoff, bringing the information, recommendations to folks like you all who are making decisions in their budgets, in their planning and policy development processes. One of the purposes in doing the needs assessment was that the different transportation providers, and I keep doing this because some of them are sitting behind me, they do budgets every year. How are we going to spend our money? How do we want to focus our programming? And this was really to say, are we answering the needs of the community? So we're all looking at our programs and our budgets based upon the assessment. You can see a little bit of how Way to Go is thinking about integrating some of the results. And we want to get back to the community. We told them in 6 months, we're going to get back to you and say, this is what we're thinking about. These are the projects that we're coming up with. We've been talking about having a summit where we look at, cross sectors, start to come up with some ideas. But I think the project aspect is really what's going to come next. What do we want to do to have people who, especially those that are struggling with transportation, see a difference in their lives? So that's it, and I'm happy to answer any additional questions that you have.
Right. Two things. Great presentation, by the way. I'm really pleased to see you're working with Cortland County. This difficulty having the two bus systems work together for the students, we hear about all the time. And there is a real need for the bus service at additional times in the for the students coming out of Cortland, out of Ithaca, both. The other thing, I did have a question going way back. You talked about bus passes for the children in the school, like for the after-school activities and things like that. Who stands the cost of that?
Who has, Melanie, do you want to help me on that one?
You need a microphone.
Oh, you have to come. And Melanie is our Way to Go team leader.
Can I use this microphone? So all students under the age of 18 or who are enrolled in high school ride TCAT for free. The reason we distribute the bus passes in the middle and high schools is because for the drivers, it's not always obvious who is, as you approach that 18, who's over and who's under. So we give the passes to make it clear to the drivers that these kids should ride free. So there's no fare that's being covered. The passes themselves are provided by TCAT.
So TCAT is standing the cost?
Of the passes, yeah.
Well, of the
cards.
transportation, yes.
Yeah, and the transportation, obviously. I was just...
Well, that's what I'm wondering about, the cost of the transportation.
Right, yeah. And again, it's all children, so from infancy through 18, ride free. So for example,
students at Cornell have passes, and Cornell pays for that. But the schools don't pay TCAT for these passes, is that right?
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Melanie, for the clarification. Susan, you've got a hand up there.
Yeah, thank you. I am a new board member of TCAT. I've been on since January. And of course, I think everyone knows there's been a shortage of drivers and issues with buses. There's a new general manager. I hope that you have had a chance to meet him. I think he's fantastic.
We've met Matt,
What's interesting to me is this report is very interesting to read, all of the solutions, recommendations. There was a public hearing yesterday at TCAT, focused specifically on, the need to, or the TCAT's inability to provide service routes provide service on routes 14S and 83. And we had quite a number of people that fit within some of the profiles that you're discussing here that had to do with, and a lot of people having issues in the west end of Ithaca. So I'm wondering, do you meet regularly with TCAT? Is that, how are you interacting with them? Because they're at a point where we've all identified all the issues and they're working to resolve them. But I think it would be, I don't know whether that public hearing, if they recorded it, if it's available, was very interesting to hear directly from the bus riders about their experiences. And they've also had issues with, the cards and the payment issues. So they are working through their issues. But I just was curious about, how do you interact with them? Do you meet with them regularly, or, as a board member? I'm interested in that aspect.
Yes, we do meet with them regularly. Scott Vanderpool was a great managing director. It's not managing director, is it? It's
general manager.
General manager. I never get that right. And Matt, we're very happy. We've met him. We've worked with him a little bit. He's been very open and interested and eager to join our conversations. He's joined the Transportation Equity Coalition. So in that case, we meet with him every other week. Melanie and other Way to Go staff are in regular meetings with TCAT, I would say weekly, if not bi-weekly.
We also attend the Riders Advisory Committee meetings, which are bi-monthly, and we had one of our transportation educators was actually at the hearing last night and wrote up a report for our team.
Great, thank you. That sounds great.
Thank you for asking, and really we see in many ways TCAT as the backbone, and we understand the struggles and difficulties for sure that came out of COVID.
I think they're on the right track now, though.
Yes.
Thanks for the input on that, Susan. Greg, you have a question?
Yeah, last question for me. Is it just ICSD students that receive the bus passes, or is it any K through 12 in the county that's under the age of 18?
So our distribution program is focused on the Ithaca City School District because it's facilitated by the School Success Transportation Coalition, which is affiliated with the school district. However, we have also provided passes at, I'm forgetting the school that's right downtown, the charter school, New Roots. So we have distributed them at New Roots, and we are hoping to expand, now that we have some additional staff at Way to Go, we're hoping to expand our program to Lansing and Dryden.
Great.
Yeah, thank you for this. It's a lot of good information and a lot of work. So Way to Go doesn't receive any county funding at this point. Do you have funding going forward do you think it's going to continue for some time from the sources you're currently getting funding from?
So our primary funding right now is the Department of Transportation 5311 funds.
You hope so.
So we have a contract with the county at the moment through the end of the year. We've regularly received those funds, but this year they will be going out to RFP. So we will apply with others to receive funds for mobility management.
Thank you. And you mentioned in your report that there a lot of referrals came through 211. Was it 1,000 referrals came through 211?
Over 1,000, yeah, on transportation-related issues alone.
Right. That's a lot in 1 year.
Okay. I have to say there are a number of repeat callers as well.
Right.
And they do the scheduling for, they're still doing the scheduling for FISH, I believe, which is a volunteer driver program. So if someone wants to get a ride to a medical appointment through this volunteer driver program, they call 211 and they'll reserve a ride for them. So that's another service they provide, which probably adds to those numbers somewhat.
And then you mentioned, Mike brought up collaboration with Cortland County and how you're collaborating with other counties. Was there a restriction on that in the past, or was there just not a group of people that were collecting to solve these problems? How did that come about?
There just was not an entity who was bringing those different players together. So it's possible they can write MOUs. Cortland does currently come into Tompkins County and has for a while, not because of us. But it really took our Move Together New York person to bring them together to talk about the coordination of the schedules. So that's not a given as part of the MOU necessarily. So we're trying to make that more of a standard.
Yeah, are you aware that Corning the glass, they're sending bus in here and transporting employees and dropping them off at various spots and picking them up in Tompkins County? I just found out about that.
I think that you mentioned that to me.
Right.
And I think it's those types of activities we want to understand more about, because then it's can they do double duty? Can they also bring other people to work? I think those are the types of things we want to look at. But no, haven't really understood that was happening, so we want to do that. Working with employers is a big next step for us to see. I mean, it's a benefit to the employers to know that they can count on employees showing up, that they can draw from a wide range within the county and outside of the county. So how do we work with employers to ensure that transportation can be covered if it's a problem for people they want to hire? I think with the Ithaca Green New Deal and the fact that we want to make so many changes in terms of electrification in the city, it means that we're going to have to bring in a workforce because we don't have that capacity of workforce within the county. We'll need to bring it in from other counties, and transportation is going to be an issue to make sure that workforce can actually show up. So we are looking at how we can play a role in trying to fill those gaps.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Dawn, thanks for the presentation, and thanks to others that are here to support you and are part of the team.
Thank you for having us.
Hope you keep it going, too.
Is Frank involved with the next resolution? Are you going to join? Would you want to join us? I don't know. Okay. Why don't you come up with us here, Teresa? We have a resolution on the agenda, amendment of the 2024 Tompkins County budget to reflect appropriation of 2024 to 2025 budgets for the Ithaca Tompkins County Transportation Council and authorization to implement the amendment. ID number 12321.
I move it.
Moved by Mike. Second by Greg. Questions or discussion? Teresa, quick summary?
The ITCTC is hosted by the county. We're 100% federally funded, so there are no county funds involved in this budget. We are simply told by Federal Highway and Federal Transit, this is your appropriation and this is your budget. We can't increase it, we can't decrease it.
Thanks.
So they got a little extra money, is that right? And that's why we're doing this?
This is actually our new budget for the 24-25 year. Our fiscal year starts April 1st of every year.
But there's a little bit more money this year, right?
A little bit,
Yep.
yeah.
Careful to say.
Not a lot.
Well, that's always good news to have.
Yeah.
Further discussion? Roll call. Susan?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Greg?
Yes.
Randy?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Thank you.
Thanks for
Thank you.
coming, Teresa.
Anything further on transportation, Mike?
Just two quickies. I did attend the Route 13 open house meeting that DOT put on for the upcoming improvements to Route 13 through the city, which was very interesting, had all the maps, and it looked like it was being fairly well attended. It was at the high school, and they always do a nice job trying to set up and have displays and people there to answer questions. And so I thought that was good. We also need to start focusing again, talking to our planning department, for example, about focusing on how we can get some funds for the upgrade of the intersections at Route 13 outside the city. The other thing, we heard a little bit from the new manager at TCAT about the actual problems with the electric buses. And it was kind of interesting to me to find out that the buses we bought didn't have chassis.
Yeah.
And didn't have metal chassis. And the frame, which is fiberglass, was actually glued to the where the wheels are connected. And that's where they were coming apart. And that we aren't the only bus system that has that problem. I think they mentioned another one, maybe Susan knows the name of it, another city, maybe in Canada, where they've had to pull all their electric buses out. And so they're trying to figure out whether they can do this. But it was actually, Matt said it was actually a failure of the glued parts with the fiberglass. And they're trying to find someone who knows a lot about fiberglass to see whether this is fixable. He also told us that the electric buses on order from TCAT are from a different manufacturer and will have a metal chassis on them. So they're looking at that. The company that made the buses we have now that we've pulled out of service has gone bankrupt and has been absorbed by another company that's in financial issues too. Susan, did I get that right?
Yes, Proterra, yeah. Yeah.
It's not a used Elmer's.
We were fortunate that they, found the cracks in the chassis. I mean, they just happened to notice them, and then Matt started looking into all this, and this the whole thing sort of snowballed, so, yeah.
Did they use fiberglass for weight?
Yeah, that's what he said. It was the reason they had done it that way was because of the extra weight of the batteries.
Sure, okay, that makes sense.
I can't wait to see the improvements when the mandated school buses get thrown into the mix here.
I think even Corvettes have, which are fiberglass, I think have a metal chassis.
Well, thanks for the updates, Mike. We had budget adjustments and transfers for information only, mostly year-end transfers. Any questions on those, Mike?
And maybe Lisa can help me with this, but the two transfers out of highway, because I don't see Frank here anymore, not Frank, Jeff, both look like they're taking unfilled position money and using it for other things in the department. Is that in accordance with our policy? I know when we changed the rollover policy that the unused money couldn't be rolled over. So is that okay? There's a civil engineering line, 29,000 in one adjustment, and highway clerk in another adjustment. maybe if you don't know the answer, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but that caught my eye. I don't remember seeing things like that before.
I can look back into that, Mike, and let you know. I can't answer it on the spot.
Thank you.
Okay, anything further? And you didn't think we had much of an agenda, Jordan? Shall we stand adjourned?
Thank you.
The job expands to fit the time allowed.
Thank you. See you guys soon.
Hi, Susan.